Well, today we've had the substitute, but I think you're going to be very interested because Chief Superintendent Scott Duval, who's Acting Assistant Commissioner Security and Emergency Management Services at SA Police, will address us about what SAPOL is doing in terms of terrorism issues, which is a topic, I guess, that has been in the media, discussed over barbecues and everywhere for the last, 3 or 4 years quite intensely. Scott's a 33-year SA policeman. He's, all those businessmen should be shaking their boots. He's been in the member of the Major Fraud Squad. He's been in the Drug Squad, Major Crime Investigation. He's Pedophile Task Force and Criminal Investigation Branch. And I'm sure lots of other areas. So Scott's career in the police has covered just about every aspect of policing in this state, and I now ask Scott to come up and address the group. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Rob, for that introduction. As has already been explained, unfortunately the Commissioner of Police wasn't well today, so yes, I am a substitute. We'll go with the draft pick, as the Commissioner would say. But today's all about really security, and in the sense of security, it's state security and national security. And I really must open with the statement that some of this does sound quite frightening. The reality is that terrorism is very real and it is quite persistent. So they are the facts we're dealing with, and really our presentations on terrorism are about really just preparing people for a situation that we hope never occurs. But from a policing point of view, we believe that we are well covered in this state to respond accordingly, and we have some very good prevention plans going on. So again, that's part of the presentation. So unfortunately, Australia is a terrorist target. We sit amongst the global sphere of terrorism. We are a Western ally, and it's certainly no secret that Australia supports the efforts that are being undertaken internationally to effectively suppress much of the terrorist activity. But in saying that, that does make us a threat. That does mean that we as Australian citizens live each day with the prospect that a terrorist attack may occur. And that's something we like to put in people's minds, but at the same time understand that we still need to live our lives as we normally would do. We sit here today and I don't feel at threat. We don't have police outside because I'm here speaking about terrorism. We have some very good procedures with Adelaide Oval when we have major events here in terms of preparing the venue for appropriate levels of security. We run a high visibility police force, and that's all about reassurance. It's about saying to people when you come to major events and major public gatherings that there is police numbers there, and in many respects that acts as a deterrent to anyone who is considering any type of incident. And often that can range from just really unruly behaviour right through to the worst scenario that someone would seek to attack a major event. So we do live with that prospect, and Australia is regularly mentioned in terrorist propaganda. We know that South Australia has been mentioned in bushfire attack. There's magazines that are produced by terrorist groups that like to inspire people to do certain things. So we know that South Australia has been mentioned. Again, quite scurrilous, but something that we can't ignore. Now, the greatest threat to our national security does come from Islamist extremists. And I must say that the way the media portray people of Muslim faith and Islamic faith can be quite unrealistic. Many of these people follow a religion that professes peace. They are law-abiding citizens, and they are not the people who we see acting in extremist ways. The people who do that really hold quite distorted views of the religion. And we often talk about the fact that people who lean towards terrorism are not people who follow the Islam religion or Muslim faith. They are people who have a distorted view, and that view is very much the removal of Western governments and the creation of Islamic states. There's a terminology that's used for the Islamic State, which you'll hear them often spoken about, where they are creating a caliphate. And a caliphate is about the Islamic State taking over regions, in effectively having them under their control. So their goal is really to disrupt and remove Western governments. But as I said, it's really not about Muslim people. They are really people who deplore terrorist activity. Perhaps often their voice is not heard strong enough because the voice that gets heard is the voice of terrorism. That does get the publicity, and unfortunately it creates a negative sense against our Muslim people. So here in South Australia we have a fantastic Muslim community. They are spread across the state and they really contribute very successfully to our way of life. So in terms of where Australia sits, we have a national terrorism threat level. In November last year, the federal government changed the system. It was a system that had ratings of medium and high and extreme. It went to a system of just different levels, and it's really about informing people about what the potential for a terrorist attack is. The current level sits at probable, and again, that comes as no secret that a terrorist attack could occur at any time. Also, there is a threat level against police. We ourselves are potential targets. Police and military have a specific threat level against them. And really that's about saying that police in public are exposed. But again, we equip our police officers very well with operational equipment and we train them, and I have every confidence they are well prepared to respond to anything. So what we say to the public is just to exercise some caution. We have a national security hotline that enables people to inform of suspicious behaviour. It allows people to ring a hotline where they have concerns about someone who may be radicalised. And it's a term that you'll hear reasonably frequently. And it's a process where someone goes from being, I dare to say normal, but quite a law-abiding citizen, to having some views that are very extreme. And it's a process of radicalisation. And what we've seen in recent times, particularly with Islamic State, is their potential to radicalise someone has really been enhanced by social media and the internet. If we go back to 2001, Al-Qaeda was the terrorist group that took responsibility for the attacks in New York. They were quite a fussy group of terrorists. They were very particular about who they involved in their group, and they trained and they made sure that what they surrounded themselves with was people they could trust. The next generation of terrorist groups was the Islamic State that came out of Syria and Iraq, but what they did was use the internet to really expand the boundaries of how they recruit people. And they're not fussy. Their message is very much about attacks across the world. I call them a lazy terrorist group because their aim is to recruit people in to commit an attack in the interest of what they're trying to do. So they're very much about a sophisticated and tailored message. If we look at some of the recent incidents that occurred in Australia, we have a 15-year-old boy in New South Wales who was sufficiently radicalised to execute a New South Wales police employee outside a police building. Previously unheard of, how a child could get to that point of having thoughts of effectively taking a firearm and killing someone. That's the level of messaging that these people are able to do, and they can do that from quite remote places. We know that there's about 110 Australians who are fighting offshore in Syria and Iraq. Some of those people have been killed in the conflict. And the message about Islamic State is a number of things. One is they are seeking Australian citizens to come and join the fight and join the conflict in Syria or Iraq. They also encourage people who for some reason can't come or are not that way inclined to actually commit an attack on home soil. And again, that becomes very difficult from a policing and law enforcement point of view to try and monitor all these people. And the internet is very pervasive. The messages they can put out are 24-hour, but it allows them to communicate with people and effectively get in their minds. And that's what we're seeing. So the radicalisation of particularly young people is very concerning, and there are programs that we do there that I'll explain on in a minute. So we do have Australian citizens who have gone offshore to fight. We also have those Australian citizens who, through some strengthened Commonwealth legislation, have been prevented from leaving Australia to go and join the fight. So in many respects, it's been a very useful thing to do, but also what it does is causes those people to remain on home soil, and if they are still that way inclined, is to continue their efforts to actually commit an attack. So whilst the legislation has served a very good purpose, it's also meant that people who were going offshore to fight now remain here in Australia and continue to have those same thoughts. We also know that there's about 190 people across Australia who are actually providing finances to support terrorist groups. And again, we're mainly talking about Islamic State through the Syria and Iraq region. Al-Qaeda still has a strong presence in the Middle East, and we have terrorist groups throughout Indonesia. And if we look at those groups, they pose, particularly through Indonesia and the proximity, and Scruffy, you know, being Northern Territory man, how close Indonesia is to Australia, that terrorist groups that operate out of Asian countries certainly cause much concern to Australia. Our intelligence really tells us that if we had a terrorist attack here in Australia, and dare I say it, South Australia, it's likely to be quite unsophisticated. If we look at recent attacks, they're committed mostly by lone individuals. They may have an affiliation to a group, but their method of attack is quite unsophisticated. They may have low-level weapons like firearms, knives, and they do it pretty much on their own. And they do it if they profess to be a martyr, as someone who believes that if they commit this act, then they will have great things happen to them. So the basis we work on here is that unsophistication is something that we predict we wouldn't see a Paris-style attack, which is multi-attacks across an area at the same time, quite sophisticated, very tailored, very well planned. Whilst that's something that we do plan for, we believe that should it occur, it's likely to be less sophisticated than that. So the Australian government really works across the nation. We sit here as a jurisdiction that has state authority. If a terrorist attack occurs in South Australia, it's the state police who have authority, and we maintain that authority over any other national authorities. But what happens is every state comes together. So across Australia, the strength of our intelligence resources, our law enforcement, comes from the 7 states and territories, with their law enforcement intelligence together with the federal police, really having a combined effort about sharing information and sharing the knowledge that allows us to well prepare and well respond. So in really going forward, what we're looking at is we run programs through schools. We educate teachers about looking for different behaviours that may indicate, particularly a youth, is heading towards some unusual behaviours. And that's particularly in the radicalisation field. If we can prevent that behaviour occurring early on, and there are programs that we can support children and families with to steer them back on a good path. And again, that's something we do across the nation. We work with all our education providers and welfare agencies here in South Australia to make sure, again, it's a coordinated effort. And whilst we wear the uniform and we're the first responders with the fire and the ambulance, it's the other agencies that all come together to make sure that our preparedness is very strong. So in doing that, it's really also about looking at social media and how we put counter-narrative into social media to try and bring people back on the right path, where we see, again, the offshore influence of some of these terrorist groups and their ability to do that remotely. They don't need to meet face-to-face with someone to convince them to be part of terrorist planning. So we know that the internet is a problem. There is no internet police, unfortunately. It is a global problem, and again, through our Australian Federal Police partners, we work offshore to make sure that we have a very much a coordinated response. So really, our strength does lie in this state, in the relationships we have with our community. We have good confidence in the community. Mostly people respect the police, and mostly people have confidence in the police to be able to look after their safety. And whether that's here at Adelaide Oval, we always have a significant police presence at major events. We provide information to Adelaide Oval security that informs their security presence, and we make in many respects, we look at the security and say that it's just something that has to be in place. It's become an accepted way of life now that if you come into a major event, there is a screening process, bags are searched, there is a strong presence of security on the gate, and there's a very low tolerance on poor behaviour. So that provides that level of reassurance for major events that you will come to an event like this and it will be safe. But unfortunately, there are no 100% guarantees. We rely on the strength of our intelligence and sharing information globally. And we also rely on the strength of the community. It's the community who are our eyes and ears if they see unusual behaviour. If they know of someone who's gone off on a wayward path, the ability to contact someone to make sure that that path is redirected. So I guess I finish with the fact that it is about exercising caution. Our own police, we train them to respond appropriately. Yes, we carry guns and we carry a range of operational equipment, but it's just part of providing a proper response. So our community message is very much about live life as normal. That's what it's all about. If you look at places like Paris that have suffered attack, it's very much about getting normality back as quickly as possible and sending a very clear message that, yes, you may have beaten us on this occasion, but we won't be beaten down continuously. So that also provides a level of community resilience that allows, I think, the recovery process to be much better should, dare I say it, an attack here in South Australia occur. So that's the message, and as I said, please don't go away from this thinking that we are constantly under attack. I'm confident. I stand here today without a firearm on the basis that I'm pretty safe, and I'm certainly safe amongst this crowd. So thank you very much for your time, and if we have time for questions.
All right, we've got two roving mics and we'll take some questions, and Steve Larkin, just wait for the mic to approach. Step forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I became aware recently that South Australia probably enjoys the highest level of confidence in its police force of any state in Australia. I presume that's still the case?
Yes, it is.
What about polling our immigrant communities? And the reason I ask that is coming here today I heard that there's a particular issue now amongst homelessness amongst our, not our, but, and I wasn't sure where this report came from, but the South Sudanese community with an increasing level of homelessness and so on. Do we poll those communities for their perception of the way our emergency services and particularly the police work with them?
Just to put some explanation around our surveys around community confidence is we don't actually run the survey. The survey is run by an independent company and it's done across Australia and it's polled across Australia. So it's a random community that they poll. We don't actually know who they poll. So I would hope that amongst that, and we are a very multicultural community, that they would pick up in their polling group a range of ethnicities and languages spoken into that survey. So whilst the surveys are great, I think it's a lot of that on the ground message too, that are we doing the best job we can? It's wonderful to take a survey and it might be only a small group that says we have the highest rating of police agencies amongst Australia, but if the information on the ground doesn't support that, then I don't think we're really doing our job. So I certainly feel proud to wear the uniform and the response we get on the streets supports most of that, but I certainly take the point that we have a very multicultural society with some different cultures that we need to fully understand. Part of our gaps at the moment would be providing a police service that is multicultural. Have we got sufficient numbers of West African police officers to actually understand issues within a community?
John.
Sir, you mentioned about we should watch out for activities which are perhaps not becoming, but the question I have is, it's no good telling all the white people, you've got to go out and you've got to talk to these, I'll use the word Muslim in this case, those Muslim groups of people that are here, particularly, and talk to them. Make them feel as though they're Australian. I mean, with respect, I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, you know, if you looked like an Australian, you know, you'd get along a lot better. And they said, well, what's wrong? And I said, well, you know, you've got a great big beard and lots of other Australians do. And I said, the lady's got a big headdress. I said, if she took that off, you'd look like Australian. Nobody would care what religion you were. This is the sort of message we've got to get across to them. They've got to become Australians and adopt our culture. Would you comment?
I've got to be very careful here. This really is a personal view. As you heard, I've been in policing over 30 years and I've policed across the state. I've policed different cultures. My job at the moment is around counter-terrorism. I have a range of other roles, but my integration with, in particular, our Muslim communities, our African communities, is excellent. We have fantastic support from them, and I understand they have a culture, and I actually want them to hang on to their culture. I think it's important for Australians to accept their culture. As I said, a very, very small minority of our Muslim community hold extremist views, and in South Australia, I would say it's a very small part of that community. The rest of that community is fantastic, and I welcome them as Australians.
Thank you very much for the insight today. I think that was really, quite a wonderful speech. Thank you very much for that. The question I've got is around the uniforms of police officers. It seems to me that the change to the dark uniforms seems to look more of a military type engagement. And I'm just interested in what drove the police to do that, because to me it seems that you talk about the high respect the police have. It seems to me that the older uniforms were more welcoming type of uniform for police, and it seems to me like it's a more confrontational type view that's been taken out to the public, and I guess it also filters through to what we're seeing from Border Protection too.
Yep. We did a complete review. Our old uniform, which was quite a pale blue shirt with blue pants, became quite impractical. And in doing that, we went to a dark navy. It looks black, but it's dark navy. So the comment that has been made by some is that it is a very militaristic look and quite authoritarian. New York police have a similar colour. But on the other side of that, we got some great comments from the community that when the police now come, some of those issues actually resolve themselves because the uniform actually looks like the authority. And at the end of the day, I guess we do come with some authority and power, and it's upon our police to use that power appropriately. But yes, it is a comment we've had, but on the other side, we've had some very positive comments that the uniform itself is, for our police, it's a very practical uniform. There are some features to the uniform that cover both aspects of our climate, and the colour was chosen out of more some practicality and some feedback we got from our police officers.
Right. Barbara, question?
Actually, I think you look pretty groovy.
Thank you.
My question is, as I have a lot to do with young people, do you have a program where you go actually into the schools and talk to, say, year 11 and 12, or when you talked about a 15-year-old, say, from year 9 upwards, on this terrible word, terrorism?
Yes, we do. Yes, we have recently joined up with the Department of Education, and we run programs through schools to teachers themselves, and we also run programs to children. The school curriculum is actually quite full, and there's a lot of competing interests in terms of delivering it. But in every policing district, we have crime prevention officers. We have school-based, not school-based officers, but officers that liaise with schools, and their job is purely crime prevention. They're coming at it from a preventative aspect, and whilst they go in uniform, their role is very much about building relationships and not so much using the authority side of the police, but more our preventative role and encouraging good relationships and positive relationships with kids, because one of our best tools really is that those children grow up respecting the police for what they do, and also an ability to tell the police things that they see that aren't right. So yes, we have a very strong crime prevention focus right across the state, and it's now well joined up with all the other welfare agencies as well to make sure that it is coordinated and we just don't stand on our own with a lone message.
All right. Last question, Adriano.
Thank you for addressing our club, first of all. I just want to answer John, actually. My personal feel, actually, somebody suggested I should ask the question in Italian, but anyway, I'll ask it in English. My feel is that the reason why ISIS has been successful from an internet point of view and Facebook is because they're grabbing people that are dissatisfied with the way they've been integrated here in Australia. So I reckon we need to, rather than cut that bridge with them, the less bridge we have, the more integrated they feel, the less people they will be able to attract within their organization. And because there will be kids that are unhappy, they don't feel integrated, they feel, and they will fall into the hands of ISIS. Would you care to comment on that, please?
I think you're correct. Some of the work we're doing is looking at vulnerable youth in particular and saying they're vulnerable to a range of things. They're vulnerable to drifting off into serious criminal behaviour. They're vulnerable to drifting off towards terrorist planning. They're vulnerable to a range of health and homelessness. So we're actually joining the whole package up together and saying terrorism is just one aspect of criminal activity. If we can look at the total vulnerability and make sure those people are provided with some very good resources, the families are provided with the support, we then see the end result is that there's less crime committed by them. They may not be homeless, and yes, we could actually prevent some potential terrorists coming out of it. So it's very important that we do look at that total vulnerability in that message.
It turned out to be the penultimate question. Graham, the last question.
Is not a question, but a comment. I was extremely privileged to go to Edinburgh Tattoo in Melbourne. And I have to say the police band, South Australian Police Band, performed, in my opinion, as the best of the performances. And I'm very privileged and proud to say that.
Thank you very much. Can I just add to that? I had a mother who went over as well, and okay, yes, she's not been a police officer for a long time, but she made the same comment. We are very proud of our police band. They are one of the best performing concert bands in the world, and they also have an invitation to the Queen's 90th birthday coming up shortly. So despite what you may see on Channel 7 News tonight, that I believe they're running a story that the highest paid musicians in the world and perhaps their efforts aren't in the right area, we do support our police band because they provide a great community service. So just one quick plug too, can I just add Stephen's comment about the Police Officer of the Year? If you could have a think about that, it's been running for over 30 years. I have been involved in the nomination process, and I know our police officers who received the award are extremely proud that the community has recognised their service. One of my best mates was the first single police officer to be awarded Police Officer of the Year in Oodnadatta in the mid-1980s, and he still holds his honour quite proud. So thank you to Stephen and the Unley Rotary Club for their efforts in recognising our service. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I guess the number of questions from the floor is an indication of how well you received the subject matter and also policing in this state. And I've got a small gift for you. It's the Rotary pen, but I have to say this has got a light on it. So you're about to shine a light into those dark corners of crime and solve everything. Thanks very much.